Well, hello. This is Michael Anderson, and I just wanted to say thank you to all the people that gave me a lot of good feedback on part one of A Call to Self Confidence. I appreciate everything that you guys say, and even the people that I've even dialogued with about it, either over the phone or through instant message on Facebook. I really appreciate your compliments, and I'm glad that it's helping. And I just really hope that, you know, even if one person or two or three get anything out of anything that I say, it would be great. I'm just here because I want to see hope administered to people who feel as though there is none. If you're just tuning in to this video for the first time, then you haven't seen any of the other videos at all that I've posted. I just want to let you know I am someone who believes strongly in Jesus, and He's my everything. My faith is so strong there. And if you don't believe in Jesus, or if you don't have a faith at all, or maybe you do, and it's not the same faith as mine, I just want you to know you're totally accepted. I don't judge you. And I'm just asking that you don't do the same with me. This is what works for me, and it's done the best job in my life. I mean, I've never seen the kind of power in my life that I see with Christianity. So, if you don't agree with, Christianity, then you're totally okay to do that. I just ask for one thing. Please don't, start sending me messages telling me I'm believing a lie or that I'm wrong, or even starting threads on anything that I post on this video or anything to disagree with my faith, because I'm not here to start a war over religion. I'm just here to offer a message of hope. And through reading the Bible, I see that there's a whole lot of hope to trust in. In fact, I've been able to receive a whole lot of hope in my own life just from my faith. So if you don't agree with my faith, that's fine. But at least listen to the message. That's all I ask. You can put that stuff to the side and just hear what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the topic of self-confidence and how you can improve that. So we're going to get into this. And one more thing. If you have any questions about Christianity or my faith or anything like that and how it's helped me, we can dialogue about that. Even if you're even searching for a faith or something to believe in, because maybe you believe that there's something out there, I'd love to talk to you. Just send me a message and we can chat about it. So the topic today is A Call to Self-Confidence Part 2. And the verse that I'm using from the Bible to explain this can be found in several different places. Mark 12:13, Matthew 22:39, Leviticus 19:18, Luke 10:27, and Galatians 5:14, which says that you must love your neighbor as you love yourself. In the last video, we focused on how to love yourself and why that's important. In this video, we're going to talk about loving other people and why that's important. So you may be wondering, how is loving others supposed to create more self-confidence for me? How does that work? You may think that doesn't make sense. But I have two questions for you. How do you feel when all the relationships in your life are at peace and they're stable? How do you feel when life is like that? You probably feel more confident. You probably feel like you're winning with people. It may even make you want to go out and love more people and make new friends, just so that, I don't know, because it just feels like natural to you. I know that's what it's like for me. Question number 2. How do you feel when all your relationships are absolutely unstable and chaotic? How do you feel? Maybe you may be going through something like that right now, and who knows, maybe you're not. I know for me, when my relationships feel like that, I feel like going into isolation. I don't want to talk to anybody. In fact, every time I've gone through that, I found myself not talking to any of my friends and not wanting to see them. I found myself depressed. You name it. Feeling like I can't move forward, like nobody's on my side. And when I feel like that, I feel hopeless. And that's not fun to go through. It doesn't really boost your self-confidence, at least for me. So in this video, we are going to take a look at how not loving others decreases your self-confidence and how loving others increases your self-confidence. There's a few points I'm going to talk about in this video, and some of it is pretty heavy, but just bear with me and we'll explore this topic together. So first things first, I want you to think in your own life of people that you know or have run into over the years who don't really like people very much and they're very proud of it. I've ran across a lot of people like that. In fact, I used to be one just like that. So what is the characteristics of somebody like that, and what do people usually say about that person? You can probably come up with a lot of ideas. What's the first thing that pops into your mind? Maybe it's that they are so cold, you know? Maybe that they don't like to talk much. Something that I found that a lot of people say about people like that is the word selfish seems to always come up. So, what do selfish people who don't love others usually say about other people? Once again, you'll probably come up with a lot of things. But I want to focus on three things that I've heard several times. I've heard people say that relationships are way too much work. That's why I don't deal with people. I know that I used to think like that. Some other things that I've heard other people say is, I'll go visit him or her or that family member so that they will leave me alone already. At least I went and did it. Another thing is, people are way too much to deal with. As soon as I can get away from them, I'm gone. Who needs them anyway? Who needs people anyway? I'm just going to do this all by myself. Well, I have another question for you. What kind of behavior forms out of these beliefs? And think about people you know. What do you usually gather off of them? What do you usually gather off them? Especially someone who's selfish. What do you usually gather off of those people? Something that I always hear is, oh, they think that they are right and everybody else is wrong. They don't listen to anything you tell them. Sometimes I see or hear of people who have mentioned that there was usury operating in that person. And another thing is that making promises and not keeping them. So have you ever had a friend or family member who only comes around when they want something? They're not really interested at all about creating a relationship with you. They're just after what it is that they want to get out of you. I have had a lot of people in my life like that. In fact, I have a few stories. I had a friend that I was really close with at one point, several times in my life, and once we hit our 20s, like I grew up with this guy, but once we hit our 20s, all of a sudden, he went through some trials and stuff like that. But the only time he would come to me is when he wanted money, and he would always let me know, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. I just really wanted us to start talking again. And then when I'd see him, he'd pop this question of needing money on me. And I would always give it to him, but it happened repetitively, and he promised to pay the money back and never would. So, I talked about this a little bit in previous videos, but, it was always the same thing every time. But he would always say every time, oh, I mean it this time. I mean it this time. I'm going to pay you back. We're going to talk more, and we're going to, be close and stuff. But it would never happen. And my self-confidence was so low that I would actually give it to him every time. And I needed to work on that part. And number two, I needed to set my own boundaries and stick to them. Because there were a few times when I did set a boundary with him, and then he was able to cross that boundary, and I actually gave him the money. Well, today, it's different. He doesn't get any of that money. And, I'm very happy about that, because now my self-confidence has boosted. I don't allow people to do things to me that I don't want them to do to me, which is awesome. I have another story of something that just recently happened to me. I'm not going to give too much information because this person knows who this person's on my Facebook and stuff like that. But I'm just gonna say there was a person that I knew from my past who I haven't seen in a long time. We were never really close, but I ended up running into him and talking to him at a certain building that we were at, and we had made plans to hang out, and it didn't happen. But we were going to, definitely make it happen. We were saying we need to do this soon, and it was like one of those things where you might be able to make a partnership with somebody on something, and we were going to talk about our stories and stuff like that. Well, I kept trying to make this happen, and this guy just, it would never happen. He was just never available, and that's okay. But the thing was, there was a moment where he was setting up for a certain event about his life, and he ended up calling me and asking me to help him set up the room, which was fine. I didn't mind doing that, but he ended up leaving early, and then when I left, I went home, and I didn't hear from him. I didn't get a thank you. I didn't get anything until eventually when I did text him, and then finally he said thank you, but he still has not reached out to me. He keeps promising that we're going to do this, and still hasn't happened yet. So I want you to think in your own life. Do you ever do that to people where you're only trying to get what you can out of them to help yourself? I've done this several times in my own life, and it's definitely not the best way of leaving a good impression on somebody. So that's that. Next, we're going to talk about prejudice. Now, prejudice, I'm sure you've heard, is like they separate the words. It's prejudge. That means you're prejudging something before you even know what it is. So what I found in my own life is that I had a lot of prejudices. I didn't just, and I thought I wasn't prejudiced, but when you really take a look at yourself, you'll probably find a few things. I found a lot. In fact, Proverbs 28:21 says that prejudice is wrong. I didn't know that was in the Bible until a couple of days ago, which was really interesting. When I was reading and I found it, I was like, whoa, I did not know that was there. But it's there. Proverbs 28:21. You can go look for yourself. So let's talk about prejudice. Where does it come from? Do you know? I found two things of where it comes from. Number one, it could be the pain from being made fun of from other people, or maybe a group of a certain type of people may have inflicted some sort of pain on you, whether verbally, emotionally, mentally, or physically. Another way that I found it is it's actually taught. I have a story about that in my own life. Basically, as I was growing up, I always used to hear people say a lot of negative things about Mexicans. And the funny thing is, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything positive about Mexicans. But I never had any judgments against them. But all I ever heard my whole life was they crossed the border illegally, they need to go back to their own country already, they're in here and they're not paying taxes, and they're stealing all the jobs from everybody, and nobody else can get a job because these people are taking them all. They get all kinds of assistance and help, and that's not fair because we don't, and they're just smelly, they're nasty, whatever. I've heard a whole lot my whole life about them. I've never had any judgments against them, but one day when I was in high school, I realized I didn't like them much. And I wasn't trying to not like them, but I didn't. And I had an issue with them. And I could feel that I wanted to stay away from them as far as I possibly could. And that's actually something that stuck with me for years after that. And I always said I'm not a prejudiced person. Sorry. But I could see that I had some of that prejudice in me. So that's how it was taught to me, was through hearing it from other people. Like, words really have power, you guys. You definitely want to be careful and choose your words appropriately, and make sure that you're saying things that are edifying and good, especially like when it comes to kids. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. But I didn't realize that I was being taught something indirectly. So prejudice can be taught directly or indirectly. So what does prejudice sound like? It sounds like a lot of things. You probably don't realize how deep prejudice goes, but when you really take a look, there's so many things that you may be prejudiced against. And I've been really seeing a lot of it in my own life over the last couple of years. So, some ways that I have found that are obvious on what prejudice sounds like are like this. All women are way too emotional and I can't take it. That's why I steer clear of them. That's why I don't even associate with women because they're just too emotional and I just don't understand them. I don't fit in with them. Okay? I hate men. They're all the same and all they want is one thing. So I'm done trying. And I've seen people that as soon as a man comes around, their defenses go up really quick, you know? Here's one. Black people are so ghetto. They live in rundown houses, and honestly, they are so violent in nature. That's why I stay away from them. You probably should so that your safety is not hurt. Here's one. Christians and religious people are such hypocrites. They say one thing and they do another. They preach this stuff, but really they're not living it. You know, we've heard all that. Um, here's a really sad one. When people say, I can't stand talking to old people. They never stop talking and they repeat themselves consistently. So I'm going to avoid them. I'm going to avoid these old people. And I just really hope when I'm around them that they don't see me because I really don't feel like dealing with them today. And that's very sad because a lot of old people have a lot of great wisdom. They've lived longer than we have. So, of course, yes, there's a lot more that they lived through and have been able to make it through the other side. They've lived through more challenges and more battles in their life than, we have. And they have a lot of insight and a lot of things that you can learn from if you take the time to do so. So a lot of these statements that I have just said before are things that I actually believed. In fact, one of the things about prejudice is, and what I'm saying, what you've heard me say in all of this is that most of the time people who are prejudiced say all people like this. It's always all people. They don't realize that it's only some people are like this and some people are like that. It doesn't matter whether they're a man, woman, what their race is, where they come from, what state they come from. People like to say certain things. Well, people from New York are all like this. And, it may be true to some extent, but it's not always, the full truth. So, like I said, look for it in your life. Where is it at? In fact, I want you to think in your life, have you ever been discriminated against? Let me ask you something. How did that feel? How did that feel? Have you ever watched someone get discriminated against? And how did that make you feel? I have a quick story. When I was in elementary school, I would go to the bus stop with my sister, and everything was fine. But one day, like my sister said something like, they were talking, the kids were talking about something. And my sister's like, "Oh, I didn't know that," and the kid turns around and says, "You want to know why you didn't know? It's because you're black." And then from there on, like, they would, say a lot of things to us, and it was very hurtful. My sister, on the other hand, definitely responded differently than I did. My sister was always able to hold her own ground, and she stood up for herself. But for me, it was definitely hurting me and making me feel less than, and it was hurting my self-esteem. It put a lot of fear in me about people and just put me on guard, always looking for someone to hurt me in a lot of ways. So kudos to my sister for being able to handle that. I definitely wasn't able to handle it right. In fact, it affected my future because even in my adult years, I found just because of those instances, number one, I remembered every single person who ever made fun of me for my race. And I'm serious, I still remember all of their names. It happened in middle school and minorly in high school. But it happened more in elementary and middle school. I still remember those people's names. And I found that even in my early adult years, I saw that it was really stopping me from being all that I can be. It made me feel like I was like lower than other people. And I didn't want to rise as high as I could, or even let myself rise as high as I could because of those judgments and the fear that those people made me feel. So you want to do your best to rid yourself of your prejudices. I mean, you're not going to be able to get away from the discrimination that people have, but one thing's for sure: whatever we hand out comes back. Whatever we sow, we then shall reap. You know. So and the funny thing about sowing and reaping is, whatever you hand out, not only does it come back, it usually comes back multiplied. Just like when you put a seed in the ground. You put a seed in the ground, and what do you get? A whole bunch of fruit. So it comes back on us, and that's like a big law of having a great life. It is to just stop putting out what you don't want to get. So anyway, what is the behavior of a prejudiced person like? I found two things. In my own life, I found that I stay far away from the person that I'm prejudiced against. And number two, that I found that people do, is they taunt and bash or even physically abuse the person, which is really, really sad. So one of the ways that I've been able to get over prejudice is, like, I realized maybe 2 years ago about the whole Mexican thing. And I was actually working out at a gym that was really cool. And there were Mexican people there who, cleaned up the place and stuff like that. And they are here legally. And what I found was, like, I would just go up to them and just say hello to them and be nice to them. And that really helped to break a lot of those barriers. And, they actually smell good. They don't smell bad. And I found that, now I don't have issues with those people because I'm making myself deal with it, and I'm making it so that I don't keep those judgments anymore. And I see that they're people just like you and me. So, I don't know, maybe that could be helpful for somebody. Remember the golden rule. How we treat others is how we will be treated. So, treat others the way you want to be treated. That can be found in Matthew 7:12 and Luke 6:31. How does that affect your self-confidence? Once again, what you hand out comes back. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The next topic that I want to talk about is judgment just itself, Look at people in your life. I really want you to look at the people in your life right now that you really can't stand. And I'm not talking about people that annoy you from time to time. I'm talking about the people that no matter what, when you're around them, they just really drive you to insane levels, to the point where you get all outside of yourself, and you may even say things that you don't want to say to people, or you may start treating people differently. You may go home and start treating your family differently just because you're around that person and you just can't stand them. So I want you to look at those people, and what are some things that you actually say about those people? I'm thinking of 3 different people in my life that I've been able to say that I cannot stand at some point. And some of the things that I said about them is they are disrespectful, very insensitive, selfish, only thinks about themselves and only cares about what they want and not about anything anybody else wants. They constantly complain about others on what they do when they also do the same things, and they never have anything good to say. All they do is take and not give. So, what are some things that you say about those people that you really can't stand? I mean, we all have those people in our life that really push us. So, whatever those things are, I'll tell you what, you're probably really right. You're probably right about everything that you're saying about them. But I just want to tell you, we have to be very careful about our judgments. And I'll tell you why. Because Matthew 7:2-5, I'm going to read it from 2 different versions. I'm going to read it from the Holman Christian Standard Bible, and then I'm also going to read it from the Message Bible, because I think that these 2 little versions say it very, 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 very well. It says, "Do not judge so that you won't be judged, for with the judgment you use, you will be judged. And with the measure that you use, it will be measured back to you." It's really interesting. I have always judged my dad because, like, I couldn't stand him in my teenage years. I really hated him, and I hated him very passionately. But I also found that, like, a lot of the things I was judging him for are some things that people judged me for. But I'm going to keep reading. "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' and look, there's a log in your own? Hypocrite. First, take the log out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. And this is what it says from the message. Don't pick on people, jump on their failures, criticize their faults, unless, of course, you want the same treatment. That critical spirit has a way of boomeranging. It's easy to see a smudge on your neighbor's face and be oblivious to the ugly sneer on your own. Do you have the nerve to say, let me wash your face for you, when your own face is distorted by contempt? It's this whole traveling roadshow mentality all over again, playing a holier-than-thou part instead of just living your part. Wipe that ugly sneer off your face and you might be fit to offer washcloth to your neighbor. Now, what's really interesting, I'm going to talk a little bit about my dad here. What's really interesting is in my teen years, like I said, he would always say to me, Mike, I feel like you're using me. You only come to me when you want something, and you never, ever say hello to me. You don't say goodnight to me. You don't say anything to me. I don't know anything that's going on in your life. You don't talk to me. But the only time you talk to me is when you want something from me. And there was a few times he actually even threatened to kick me out because of it. But what's really interesting is I used to, in my teen years, look at him like he was crazy for saying that, because the truth is he never talked to me either. So that's what I would always say to my friends. Like, he doesn't talk to me either. The only time he talks to me is when he wants something. So, but what was really interesting is my dad kept harping about that and harping about it. And I thought he was crazy. Well, what's really interesting is that a few years later, I started saying the same thing that he was saying about me, about other people. And I started to understand where he was coming from. And what's really interesting is, as much as I hated my father, when I was 22, I started getting life coaching. And I was working with a life coach who saw me, judging my dad really badly. So what she did was she said, take out a piece of paper, draw a line down the center of it, put your dad's name on the top of the paper. And she said, on the left side, you're going to write down everything that's negative about your dad. And you can just imagine, I had a long list. So I was like, and she asked me to read it to her, and I read off like maybe 26 things. I don't know. But then she said, now I want you to take one by one all of those things, and I want you to tell me all the people that have seen you do whatever these horrible traits that you're speaking about. And I was like, that's 26 of them. So once I was actually done telling her, out of all 26 of those qualities that I said that I hated about my dad, and all those things that he did that I said I hated, I kind of had a different perspective about my dad, because I was looking at everything that was wrong with him, not realizing I was doing the same things. And she also had me write down all the positive things, which didn't flow so easily at first. And then eventually I was able to write down a lot of it. And she told me I had to do 26, since that was 26 things that I wrote were wrong with him. And at first it was kind of hard, but then I really tugged on my brain. I found more than 26, and I just kept writing and writing and writing, because I had a new respect for him after that. And then she had me say how many people have seen me do those things and name them, which was really cool. I had a new perspective about my father. And guess what? I couldn't see the good things because I was so focused on the bad things. I mean, could you imagine? Like, you have the bad in front of your eyes all the time, and that's all you're ever focusing on. You can't see anything else. So it was just really cool when I started to see the good. There were so many things that I forgot about my dad, and that I never even gave a second thought. There were so many good things about him, and it was just really amazing that I couldn't see that for all that time. That whole 22 years, I never saw it. Isn't that interesting? So, if you have somebody in your life that you really hardly can't stand, I recommend the same process for you. So 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, let's do our best to encourage and compliment one another. So let's do our best to do that, guys. And then Hebrews 10:24 says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. So let's go to the next thing. This is one more negative side of not showing love, and then we'll start looking at some positive things. So let's talk about conflict. How many of you know you're going to experience conflict with other people, probably tomorrow or sometime soon in the future? That's an obvious. How many of you have ever experienced conflict with somebody else? That's probably another obvious. You're probably like, duh, Mike. So the thing I want to talk to you about is how do we respond in conflict? There's three different negative things that I've seen about myself and other people and how we respond in conflict. And I want you to take which one fits best in your life and see how you can go about changing that. All of these things I've done myself. So, and ever since I started working on it, it has made my life a lot better. So, how do we respond to conflict? Number one, do we run from a situation and don't try to resolve it? We just run. And when we come back, we don't want those people to bring up that situation again. And we don't ever want them to ever remind us. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to hear what they have to say. Mike Murdock said this: if you refuse to overcome something, it will eventually overcome you. And what I love about this Chinese proverb that I found, which is really cool, is it says this: if you refuse to step outside your comfort zone and face your fears, the number of situations that make you uncomfortable will keep growing. How many of you know that's true? So, in conflict, stand there and deal with it and watch what happens. Look for resolution instead of looking at everything that is happening. Look for resolution. Look for how you can solve this. Number two, do we argue that we are right and we won't give up until the other person gives up? I've done that too, And Ecclesiastes 6:11 says this, that the more you argue, the more useless it is, and you're no better off, which is really interesting. So once again, let's look for how can we resolve this instead of trying to argue and argue and argue and argue and argue. Because the more you do that, the more disrespect you're inflicting on people, and the more that we feel disrespected too. And therefore, they have no respect for us now, so that makes our confidence level go down whenever we run into a situation like that. So be always looking to resolve and see what you can do about it. Let's not argue, because the more we argue, the more the other person argues, and they still have their point of view and we still have ours, and we didn't make anything change. They still feel the same way they do, and we feel the same way we do. So, number three, do we retreat from conflict and stop talking to the person and wait for them to come apologize to us? Well, I have a question for you. This is something that I've done several times in my life. What if they never come to apologize? You'll be waiting forever. Has that ever happened to you? There are a lot of people that I ran from conflict from, expecting them to come and apologize to me, and some of them I never talked to again, which was a waste of a relationship. It was a waste, to just let them walk out of my life. They could have done something great in my life, and I could have maybe not known that they might have. They may have been a link to my future, and I would have not known that. So let's stand in the face of conflict and deal with it, guys, and do our best to look for a resolution. Let that be our main focus. I know that sometimes things can get so heated that we're not even thinking let's look for resolution, but train yourself. Eventually you can get there. So like for instance, like even myself, like I know sometimes if things get too heated, I have to walk away for a little bit before I say something stupid. So I'll walk away and calm down, and then I'll come back. I'm not running from the situation. I'm just getting myself together to deal with the situation. That's different. If you need to do that, then do that. Some people like to resolve it right there on the spot and have to. So if you're one of those people, just understand that everyone's different, and if they need their space, let them have it until they come back and are able to deal with it. Here's something about conflict that the Bible says in Matthew 18:15. It says, if your brother sins against you, go and rebuke him in private. It's so interesting because, let's take a look at this. This is Jesus speaking. And once again, I like to take things that Jesus says and kind of look at what he didn't say. So he didn't say, if your brother sins against you, go tell your parents. If your brother sins against you, go tell your boss. He didn't say that. He said, go and rebuke them in private. How often do we have a problem with somebody and we don't tell them? And then we go and tell everybody else about it. And then what does that do? That makes everybody have a different opinion about the person you're talking about. Well, you don't really need to do that. Like, why damage somebody's reputation? So, and that's something that I've done several times in my life too. I did not obey this, but I found that since I started doing this, it's a lot better. People respect you more when you come to them instead of everybody else. So let's look at this. It says, rebuke him in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. Verse 16 says, but if he won't listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be established. So once again, he didn't say, go to 3 of your friends before you go to the person and bring them with you. He said, work it out with them first. If you can't get anywhere, then go and talk to 3 other people about it and have them come. You know what I mean? So it's just really interesting, like, how we're really supposed to deal with this. We're supposed to go to the person first. We're not supposed to go to someone else first. We're supposed to go to them. And I find that to be one of the coolest things in the world is, and ever since I started practicing this, I'm not always perfect with it, but ever since I started practicing this, it's been a lot more fun to resolve conflicts with people. So then it goes on to say, if he pays no attention to you after the 2 or 3 witnesses, then tell the church. So some of you aren't in church, and that's understandable. Maybe it's something that happened on the job. That's when you go to the boss. If you're living in your parents' house, then that's when it's time to go to your parents. It's not after. It's not until after you have done all of those steps. And you know what? There are times when I've done all of that backwards. Especially when I worked at the gas station, I would go to the boss first to complain about somebody. And that was definitely disrespectful and rude to the person. They had no idea what they were doing wrong. And maybe they did have an idea. But still, I didn't try to resolve it with them. I went to somebody else expecting them to resolve it. We're supposed to resolve our own issues. So, and plus our boss, our parents, or any other person in authority has already enough to deal with. We don't need to keep bothering them with more stuff. You know what I mean? So, once again, how do you handle conflict? What do you know you need to change about dealing with conflict? And when you change it, let me tell you something, your life will change. So let's look at the positive stuff about how to create unstoppable self-confidence with people. So all the things I just talked to you about are how to decrease your self-confidence with people. And you're probably wondering, well, how is dealing with conflict going to increase my self-confidence? And I'll tell you why. Because when you deal with it right, you feel better about yourself. When you deal with it wrong, you feel hopeless once again. And then you want to isolate yourself, which then stops you from wanting to even start organizations or maybe even start a business because you have to deal with people and all kinds of people. So let's look at the positive side. Number 1, allow others to be different and enjoy what they do. Don't try to control them and make them be what you want them to be or be like you. Everybody's different, guys. I've seen a lot of people try to change people and to make them be their expectations instead of them be the expectations of what they are already. Let people be free to be who they are. Stop trying to control them. I used to try to do this with people too. I had several friends who were very close to me, and if they were on their cell phone around me, I would get very angry about it, and I would start trying to control them and stop them from being on their cell phone so much, and to some degree I was right, I'm sure, especially if they're on the phone constantly around you. That can be a little disrespectful and rude, and they're not focusing on you, they're focusing on something else. But it was like somebody else can do that around me, and it would be okay. But if this one person did that, it was wrong, So I had to take a look at that and figure out why that was, and I actually came up with some answers. So let's look at the platinum rule. The platinum rule says to treat people the way they want to be treated. So why is that important? Because everyone's different once again. People have different likes and dislikes. And if you master the art of treating other people the way they want to be treated, you'll have a loyal friend, which is really awesome. You want to especially do this with your inner circle, what we talked about in the other video. In fact, let me put it up. I have it right here. This is called the circles of life. If you weren't with me on the other video, the first video, I talked about this. The inner circle, the outer circle, and the acquaintance circle. If you didn't do this, I recommend right now that you go get a piece of paper and do this, because you'll see whether or not you have people in their proper place in your life. We all have, you know, all of these people in our life that belong closest to us, and then those who don't belong closest to us. And if we actually sit down and do this, we'll figure out where people are supposed to be. I already talked about how to do this in the last video. So if you didn't catch the instructions and the directions, go back to the other video and look at this and actually do this, and you'll get all the full instructions. But yeah, especially the people in your inner circle, you want to learn how to treat them the way they want to be treated, because they're going to be up close with you. They're going to see the good, bad, and the ugly about you, and you definitely want to have a loyal friend with somebody that's going to be up close with you. So once again, treat people the way they want to be treated. Allow them to be who they are. Don't try to change them. Don't try to make them like what you like. Don't make them try to do the things that you like to do if they don't like to do it. Okay? So number 2. Respect other people's boundaries. How do you feel when people respect your boundaries? I know I feel good when people actually hear me, and then they actually, either stop doing something that I don't like, or they, or I tell them don't ever do this, and they actually listen. You know what I mean? So how do you feel when people don't respect your boundaries? Probably feel violated. That's one thing I feel. Probably feel like you're not cared about, and like what you think doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you guys, whether you're a parent, whether you're a child, whether you're really close to somebody and you're their friend, if they have certain boundaries, you want to definitely respect those boundaries, So when they tell you something, listen, because you'll get more cooperation. The more you disrespect people's boundaries, the more you pull rebellion out of them. Have you ever noticed that? I have, and I've done it several times to my brother, and let me tell you something, it didn't work very well, So respect people's boundaries. I have a little bit of a story about this, which was really cool. I knew somebody that would love to hug so much, and that they would love to just kind of touch you on your shoulder and all that kind of stuff. I guess their love language was touch. And at the time, mine wasn't at all. I did not like being touched. I'm a little different now. I love hugs, and I don't mind being touched. But back then, when this happened, I remember, wow, this person is really making me feel uncomfortable. And eventually, I blew up about it instead of talking to them about it. Deal with things when they're acorns, not when they're oak trees. So, but after I explained everything to them and said I was sorry, they ended up making sure that they always followed my boundary, which was really cool, and they never crossed it. So, once again, you can save a lot of frustration on your part and on their part by actually dealing with something when it's a small thing. So number 3, be able to put yourself in other people's shoes, even if you don't understand the issue with them. Let's say that, I don't know, I had a lot of addictions. Let's say that, for instance, I talked about my drinking problem. Let's say that you're somebody that has never had a drinking problem. Let's say you're somebody that grew up in church, you always had great parents, and you never had any addictions, you always had a pretty stable life. And what's your natural reaction when you get around somebody that can't control something? Your natural reaction is, what's wrong with you? Just stop doing it, I've seen a lot of people who have had that attitude, but I'll tell you what, if you don't understand where they came from and understand their story, you won't understand why they're doing what they're doing. Because once you hear someone's story, usually compassion starts to flow, and you start to understand why they're at where they're at and what's broken in their life. So always be willing to listen to someone's story, even if you don't agree with them or you don't understand. At least put yourself in their shoes for a few minutes, because then the advice that you give is a little different than what it would be if you didn't understand them or know their story or anything like that. And they may appreciate your advice more if they feel like you understand them. But if they feel like you don't, they don't want to talk to you, and they don't want to hear what you have to say. So always, put yourself in other people's shoes. The last point I want to talk about is don't be afraid to hurt other people's feelings. And I'm not talking about go out of your way to be disrespectful. I'm talking about when you actually do have a problem, like I said, go and talk to the person about it. Don't just hold things in. And don't just go to everybody else and talk to them about it. You actually go to the person and deal with it. Don't be afraid to hurt their feelings. Come with a spirit of love. I have a verse for that. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So when you're dealing with something like this, one of the best things that you can do is just make sure that you're very gentle but very loving about it. Just be like, hey, I really have an issue with this, and I just really want you to know about it, and I'm just asking you to please don't do that, or whatever it takes, but just don't be rude about it. In fact, I love what my friend Rosemary says. She says, say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. I love that. I love that so much. So, when dealing with things, just, always come to a person. I'll tell you what, one of the most hurtful things that people could ever do to me is when they have an issue with me and they don't ever say anything, but yet everybody else knows about it, or they just never tell me and then they retreat from me and they start acting weird. You know, that's something that's very hurtful when people do that. And I don't, like, the thing is, if you talk to me about it, we can work it out. I'm willing to work it out. I'm willing to be the bestest friend or family member or whatever that I can be with you. Just come talk to me about it and we'll work it through. I'm not, a mean person. Just come talk to me about it and we'll work it through. So, don't be afraid to hurt people's feelings. Put yourself in their shoes. Respect other people's boundaries. Allow others to be who they are and be different. Work on, how you deal with conflict if you need to. All of those three things that I talked about, see which one that you fit into the most and work on that one. Work on the things that you're prejudiced about. And I'm telling you, a great book to read is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's by Dale Carnegie. I recommend every person on the planet reads this book. I mean, it's really an awesome book. But I'm telling you right now, like that, if you really want to have unstoppable self-confidence, it's not just about thinking well about yourself, because there's always people involved. And when you're winning with people, your self-confidence is better. When you're not winning with people, you want to isolate yourself, you feel depressed, you don't have people around you, and it just, it's definitely a much worse place to be. So, as I said in the other video, Jesus lets us know in Mark 9:23 that all things are possible for those who believe. So, I want to personalize it and say all things are possible for me because I believe. So I'm going to count to 3 and we're going to say that. 1, 2, 3. All things are possible for me because I believe. This has been Michael Anderson. Thanks for watching. Sayonara.